Welcome to the 2014 Ref Training videos, brought to you by reftraining.org. Today we're going to talk about targeting, illegal helmet contact, and defenseless player. One of the most notable changes for the 2014 season is an addition for a definition of a defenseless player. A defenseless player is a player who, because of his physical position and focus of concentration, is especially vulnerable to injury. Now, what this rule change does is it allows officials to focus on players that are deemed defenseless and look for personal fouls that occur on those players. It does not, however, create any additional fouls that were not already in the rulebook. Therefore, it is not illegal to hit a defenseless player, but it is illegal to hit a defenseless player in an otherwise illegal manner. Examples of defenseless players include a passer, kicker, pass receiver, a kick returner attempting to catch a kick, any player who is on the ground, a player whose forward progress has been stopped, a player obviously out of the play, and a player who receives a blindside block. We as officials need to make sure that we place an increased focus on defenseless players and protect them from illegal hits. The other major rule change for the 2014 season is the addition of targeting. Targeting is an act of taking aim and initiating contact to an opponent above the shoulders with the helmet, forearm, hand, fist, elbow, or shoulders. The key phrase in interpreting this new rule is taking aim. Targeting is an intentional act, and we as officials need to interpret whether contact is due to regular football actions or whether a player is looking for that big hit and intentionally targeting an opponent. Another important thing to remember about targeting is that it is not a disqualification foul unless the hit is ruled to be flagrant. There are 4 major indicators that can help us as officials determine whether targeting has occurred, and those would include a player who launches himself above the shoulders of an opponent, a player who thrusts his body in an upward motion, a player who strikes an opponent above the shoulders, and also players that lead and initiate contact high with the helmet. So let's go ahead and move into some video. Play number 1 is both an example of targeting and roughing the passer, and our targeting indicator in this case is going to be a player who's leading with the helmet. And in this case, you're actually going to see a foul that falls into 3 categories: targeting, illegal helmet contact, and roughing the passer. And once we show the replay, it can be clearly seen that this defender lowers his helmet directly into the chin of an opponent. This is a targeting foul on a defenseless player, and in this case the foul will be penalized as roughing the passer, which means we would enforce the 15-yard penalty from the spot where this play concludes. Play number 2 is a more classic example of targeting, in which we have a receiver catching a pass across the middle, takes about a step and a half, and then is hit high above the shoulders. And the key thing to focus on in this example is one of our other targeting indicators, and that is a thrust. And we're going to see this defender thrust his body upwards and use his shoulder to initiate contact to the helmet of his opponent. This is an extremely dangerous hit, and this thrust in fact has so much force behind it that it causes the defender to leave the ground following the thrust. This hit does fall under the targeting rule and needs to be penalized whenever it's seen. Because this targeting foul caused the player's helmet to come off, he would not be required to have to sit out it down. But that being said, with a hit like this, after him lying on the ground for seconds afterwards, we do want to make sure that there aren't any signs or symptoms of a concussion, and if there are, we want to send him off to get looked at by medical personnel. Play number 3 is another helmet indicator, and by that we mean the defender initiates contact using his helmet above the neck of an opponent, and this was correctly called based on last year's rules as being illegal helmet contact. And as we've shown previously, you can have a foul that is both illegal helmet contact and targeting. In this case, because that illegal helmet contact strikes an opponent above the shoulders, this play would also be considered targeting. Now, once we go ahead and slow it down, it's even more clear that this player does lower his head into the helmet of an opponent. This is an easy case of illegal helmet contact and targeting. Play number 4 is almost identical to the previous, in that we have a pass receiver who catches the ball, turns upfield, and then gets hit above the shoulders. Our indicator for this play is also initiating contact with the helmet, and this might be difficult to see in a 5-man crew because you would likely have both the deep official and the sideline official straight lined, but it is clearly a targeting play, and we need to do our best effort on the field in order to get in proper position to see this foul. Now, the previous plays were pretty clearly targeting fouls. Play number 5, on the other hand, brings us into the gray area and highlights the fact that we as officials now must determine whether contact is a normal football play and part of the normal action, or does a player aim high and or lower his helmet when he initiates contact. Now, in this example, had the defender kept his head up, the officials would have likely ruled that any helmets coming together was purely incidental, but by lowering his helmet, he puts himself in a position where this would very likely be called targeting. And that brings us into the philosophy that we're going to use when dealing with targeting. Now, because this is a safety foul, if one of our targeting indicators are present and you are just unsure of whether the contact was to the collarbone or the neck area, then we are not going to split hairs in that case, and we are going to call targeting. Play number 6 is another targeting play, with our indicator being the helmet, and this was called on the field last year as illegal helmet contact. And once we go ahead and swing it to the end zone view, it'll be clear that this player does initiate contact using his helmet to the face mask of his opponent. The key thing to remember with defensive players when they're making tackles is that they can go anywhere below the shoulders. That's a big area for number 2 to make this hit. He does not need to go high and initiate contact with his helmet. This is an easy targeting foul this year against a defenseless player. So now let's go ahead and look at some plays that are not examples of targeting. And even though these hits are on players that are considered defenseless, they do not rise to the level of a personal foul. Now this first play is easy. We have a clear attempt at a tackle. The player makes contact to the shoulder of the receiver. This is an example of a clear no call. Now we're going to go ahead and move into some plays where there's a little more power behind the hits, but they still would not rise to the level of targeting. Number 24 on the defense does a great job on this play of keeping his helmet to the side and wrapping up his player when he makes a tackle. This is a clear effort to make a legal hit, and even though once we watch this end zone view, the helmets might make slight contact, this is not a definite aim above the shoulders and would not be targeting. Number 9 is a huge hit on a definite defenseless player, but the question to ask yourself is, do we have any targeting indicators present? Could this be a different personal foul, or is this a legal football play? So let's start by looking for indicators. And on this play there is no launch, thrust, strike, And not only that, but number 13 keeps his head up through the action. The absence of an indicator is going to make us lean towards this not being targeting. And even though this player is defenseless, he is still able to be hit if done in a legal manner. And once we go ahead and slow it down, we can see that contact is actually shoulder to shoulder, and the defender is able to keep his helmet to the side and make a legal hit. Moving on to play number 10, and in this play we're going to introduce the concept of changing levels. And what that concept means is that the targeting foul requires a player to aim and initiate contact above the shoulders. Therefore, if a player commits to making a legal hit and his opponent changes levels into that zone, even though we have a shoulder to a helmet in this case, that would not be considered targeting. Now, that philosophy does not apply when the hit would also be a second foul, such as illegal helmet contact, but in this case, the defender goes to make a legal hit at what would be the waist level, but the receiver changes level suddenly and contributes to this shoulder to helmet contact. Play number 11 is an example of a defender that does almost everything right in attempting to make a tackle. And you're going to see this defender come in, keep his head up, and even though helmets do come together on this play, he does attempt to wrap up and make a genuine attempt at breaking this play up. This is a fantastic legal hit and would not be considered targeting. Play number 12 is an interesting play because we do have one of our indicators. We do have a thrust occur. The question to ask yourself is, does this player aim above the shoulders, or is this a genuine legal attempt to break up this pass? And once we go ahead and watch it from the second angle and actually slow it down, we can see that contact above the shoulders is extremely minimal. The majority of the contact occurs with the ball and his opponent's shoulder. Therefore, this would likely not be considered targeting. Play number 13 is an example of a defender that is playing the football, and even though his helmet does collide with that of the receiver, this would not be considered a targeting foul. There are no presence of any of our indicators in this play, and I think once we see this end zone shot, it is clear that the defender is attempting to intercept this pass, and any contact with the helmets is purely incidental. Play number 14 is again that classic example of what we think of when dealing with defenseless players. And that means we have a receiver going across the middle and getting hit by an opponent. Now again, the first thing you do is look for indicators. And in the case of this play, we don't have any noticeable targeting indicator. And because of that, and the fact that contact is not above the shoulders, we will not have targeting on this play. But that doesn't mean we can't have a different personal foul. So let's instead focus on the timing of the hit. And now we have to determine whether, once it's clear that this pass is going to be incomplete, does the defender have enough time to pull up and not make his otherwise legal hit. And it does appear that this defender did have the time to at least alter his path, but instead decided to play through the receiver to deliver as much damage as possible. This could be a personal foul, but definitely cannot be targeting. Play number 15 highlights an example of the importance of working together as a crew, especially when we're dealing with targeting fouls. Now, the most important aspect of having 5 or more officials on the field is the different angles that it provides. And watching this play, we can see that there was a foul called for illegal helmet contact. But as we go ahead and watch the replay, we can see that there was no contact to the helmet of the receiver, which means this could not be a targeting foul. And when we go to this final replay, we can see that the sideline official got a little too close to the action. So what we want to do is definitely stay back out of harm's way. That'll give us plenty of room to widen our vision, see this play in its entirety, and lower our chances of getting injured on this play. Moving on to play number 16, and in this play we can see a textbook launch. And we're going to see this defender launch himself up into the receiver. And now that we've determined that we do have an indicator, the second thing to determine is this a targeting foul? And as we watch these replays, we can see that contact was below the shoulders and not above. That means that targeting is off the table, and because the ball is in the receiver's hands at the time, it is clear that number 2 is making a necessary football play in order to break this pass up. Now that being said, had he contacted above the shoulders to the head area in this launching fashion, a disqualification would easily be supported. Now moving on to play 17, it's important to remember that targeting can occur not just on defenseless players, but on any player, and that includes the runner. Now in this play we have number 7 on the defense attempting to make a tackle, and what he's going to do is he's going to thrust in an upward motion and put his shoulder into the head of the runner. And because of that indicator and the contact above the shoulders, this would fall under the category of targeting. Now remember, one of our defenseless player categories is a player who's on the ground. And in this case we have a runner who after going to the ground is hit by an opponent, and the contact is to his head and neck area. But if we go back to the philosophy introduced in play number 10, here we have a change of level, and because of that change of level, this would not be targeting, but we could have a different personal foul. And once we get here to the view that the head linesman had, we can see that the defender clearly had time to avoid making this hit, but instead decided to drive his shoulder pad into the runner who was already on the ground. This was an excellent pickup by the head linesman. Play number 19 is an example of a hit on a runner that would not be considered targeting. And we're going to see here a defender attempt to make a legal tackle, and he's going to lead with his shoulder into the shoulder of the runner. He also keeps his helmet to the side. This is excellent form and a completely legal play. Moving into our last 3 plays, we're going to take a look at illegal helmet contact and targeting when we're dealing with blockers and defenders who are engaging blockers. So this first play, let's take a look at this return player highlighted here. And he's going to deliver a block to number 3 on the kicking team. And in doing so, he's going to lower his head and deliver a blow directly to the chin of his opponent. The most likely official to pick this up would be the back judge as he transitions from the catch of the kick downfield to blocks. That being said, this is not an easy foul to pick up in live game speed on the field, but we as officials need to do a better job of both identifying and calling these fouls. Play number 22 is going to be an example of a targeting foul, in which we have a defender engaging a lead blocker high into the helmet. So let's go ahead and keep an eye on number 24 here. He's the lead blocker, and he's the player who the defender is going to hit high. And when we focus in on this action, we can see that the defender does thrust his shoulder up and into the helmet of his opponent. This is a targeting foul, even though this lead blocker is not considered defenseless. And what this means is that when a player either blocks an opponent or defends a block, he must make every effort to aim below the shoulders and above the waist. Our final play of the tape is going to be an example of a legal block where we do not have targeting. And in this case, the player that receives the block is considered defenseless because he is receiving a blindside block. But because that contact is not high and above the shoulders, we would not have targeting. And let's go ahead and highlight number 34 here. And he's going to deliver a blindside block, but he's going to do so with his shoulder into the shoulder of the opponent. The hit does not fall into any other personal foul category. Therefore, this would be a legal hit. And that's the conclusion of our targeting and illegal helmet contact videos. We hope you enjoyed it. Please join us at reftraining.org for more training videos.